Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. Tonight I am delighted to be joined once again. It seems to have been a while since Kev McCluskey joined us from Hungary. Kev, how are you?
Yes, I'm very well, Paul. Thanks. Aye, does seem like a while, doesn't it? I can't remember what was the last game we did because I think I missed the cup final. So it's been a while, been a good few weeks. But good
Hard
to
time,
get
I
back
met.
on and have a wee chat again.
And since you've been
Mhm.
having your wee break, you've been all over the place. You've been on the telly, on the radio. Anybody who wants to talk about Hungarian football has come to you. So the timing's been not too bad for yourself, has it?
Aye, exactly. I'm totally milking my 15 minutes of fame here. I've got the title of being what am I, Scotland's number one Hungarian-based journalist. So I'm top. I'm number one in the field of one, and I'm quite happy to sit there for a
Ah,
while.
well,
It's been
quite right,
been an
quite
interesting last
right.
week or so.
I bet, and quite right, mate. So
Mhm.
just soak it up, and hopefully you can come on and cover the game against Hungary as well when Scotland face the country that you have resided in for some time now, a few years. We know what the starting 11s are. We're going to be looking through them, and forgive me for having a particular interest, Kev, in Celts past, present, and possibly future, because when I'm looking at these teams, that's largely what I'm
Mhm.
interested in. Some people will think that's a bit selfish. It is a Celtic state of mind after all. And yes, we are currently just finishing up episode 3 of This is Acsom, which is on the channel right now. Go and check it out. It's a Celtic state of mind with Bobby Petta. It is live, of course, but you can go back and watch it later on. Someone in the comment section, Kevin, said, terrible scheduling. Well, it's a Friday night show. It finishes
Aye,
before
I mean,
kickoff. Would you rather listen to Graham Souness? I know what I would rather do.
I don't know, I think the Euros could have delayed the kick-off of this game for a wee bit longer, just so we
Of
could get that
course.
wee bit buffer time in between the two.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly
Blame
what I would
UEFA. There
expect.
you go.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to blame them. Now, the Scotland starting 11, as I say, we are going to be focusing on Celts, past, present, and future. It kicks off as Angus Gunn in goals, Tony Ralston. We're going to come back to talk about Tony. Andy Robertson, of course, Scott McTominay, Kieran Tierney, John McGinn, Callum McGregor, Shea Adams, Ryan Christie, Jack Hendry, Ryan Porteous. Plenty of Celtic related and Celtic tinged faces and names in that starting 11. And of course, there are many others on the bench. Liam Kelly, thank goodness we didn't sign him. Xander Clark, Grant Hanley, Lawrence Shanklin, Billy Gilmer, Liam Cooper, Stuart Armstrong, Lewis Morgan, Tommy Conway, Ryan Jack, Ross McCrory, Kenny McLean, Greg Taylor, James Forrest, Scott McKenna. Um, I mean, we're represented, let's just say, Kev. We're well represented in that starting lineup and also on the bench, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, and we should be. We're the number one club in Scotland. Uh, you know that most of our best players are not going to be Scottish these days, but you would still like to think that our best Scottish players that start regularly for a team that's won 5 trophies in the last 2 seasons, those boys are going to make it into the national team. So it's great to see Callum McGregor in there, obviously. Going to be a huge player for Scotland in the tournament, you would think. And Ralston, the first player that you mentioned, it's like I remember coming on in the first shows I did on Acsom, and Ralston was a laughing stock. We were loaning him out to St Johnstone, and his Celtic career was going nowhere. And just a few short seasons later, he's representing the national team at a major tournament. So it's a massive turnaround for him.
I want to focus a wee bit on Tony Ralston. I mentioned him today. I was talking to Jim. Jim's an avid watcher and follower of the Scotland national team. He's a bit gutted, in fact, Kevin, that he's not at the game tonight because he follows Scotland. He missed a friendly and it affected his points. That's a bit unfair. We should have had some kind of campaign, get the Oracle to Germany. Sneaky one, Jungle Line. Yeah, sneaky little pre-match from the boys. We decided going into this tournament, Jungle Line, that we were going to cover all the Scotland games, and we were hoping also to cover the Denmark games as well, Kev. But you know what? No interest in them anymore because Matt O'Reilly did not get
No.
selected. So we're sticking to the Scotland games, and that's going to kick off this evening. Here we go. We're running 2 live shows. We're so far ahead of the game, says Joe Hamilton. Talking, of course, about this is Acsom with Bobby Petta. We were planning to put that out a wee bit earlier, but it's a quick turnaround from the Wednesday filming to getting it out on the Thursday. 6 o'clock is generally the time that we'll be doing that going forward. And we've got loads of great guests lined up as well. Now, Tony Cassidy was on earlier on. Absolutely brilliant. Here we go. Tony, hail, lads. Thank God for the two of you. Well, at least Tony is happy with us, Kev.
At least somebody likes us, eh?
Yeah,
nice.
somewhere Spain to tune into the match. Prediction 4-0 Germany. But I hope 10-0 for Celtic. Bricky 2 hat-tricks. Love yous. Listen, the big thing, Tony, with the match stuff was during the pandemic, it was really just, we couldn't go to the games. So we started covering every game. And early doors, we actually covered the full game. It was like a watch-along. And we've done that a few times since. But at that time, as you'll know, Celtic season ticket holders were given a link to Celtic TV. That was our season ticket, plus a £50 voucher to spend in a Celtic shop, Kev. And even though you were watching that official stream on the official Celtic TV channel, people were watching it elsewhere and they knew that goals had been scored before we did. So it turned out to be a bit of a useless exercise. So what we do now, pre-match, halftime, full-time. And is this the first? Yeah, is it the first tournament? No, it's not. Since we started streaming live, there was the other Euros during the COVID.
Which was the Euros, the 2021, which got played in 2021.
Yeah. So we could have covered that, but we didn't. Come on, the Ralstonator says Jimmy Tick 74, Joe Hamilton, Big Anthony will get stuck right in. And I think across Europe and further afield, they'll have an idea. Other nations will have an idea, Kev, of what Scotland bring to the party. And you've seen a lot of the scenes today. It's colour, it's singing, it's the fan experience as much as anything else. It always has been when Scotland get into the finals of a European tournament or a world tournament. And they do, obviously, the nation proud, but you also want the team to have an identity. And you want the team to be feared as well. What do you think other nations think of Scotland? Is it all about aggression and discipline, and rather than the flair and that type of player? Is that, do you think, how other nations see us?
I think it is, sadly, but it's probably a fair reflection as well. A couple of weeks back, I was doing an interview with the Nimzeti Sport, the national sports paper here,
Just another wee
and I
name
was
drop
asked
there,
that
Kev.
question. Of course, you've got to do it. I've learned for the best, Paul. You're dropping in Bobby Petter already, so got to try and play it. Aye, but those guys were asking the same, and they're basically saying or telling me that their view is that Scotland will play that kind of typical British style of football. It'll be really physical. It'll be the long ball that gets played forward. They don't expect us to have very many flair players and try and play football. I think they'd be surprised if they watch Scotland, because I think Scotland's actually a pretty decent team when they're on their game. Steve Clarke's done that thing with the national team that he did with Kilmarnock, when he's made them really solid, normally pretty solid and tough to break down. But if you've got a midfield that's got Callum McGregor in it, then you've got a baller in the middle of the park. McTominay can pass the ball around a bit as well. McGinn, Christie, neither of them are big physical players. So I think we've evolved a wee bit into becoming more of a footballing nation. But I think the general opinion still is and will be for a while that Scotland is a physical long ball team, and maybe that'll stand in Scotland's favour tonight. Teams will underestimate how we actually play. We might cause a wee surprise.
Well, yeah, it could do, because I think, and I'm not just picking a few from generations of football teams that Scotland have had representing the country at World Cups and European Championships, but we have had flair as well. I mean, you think back, obviously, to the 60s, and, as well as the obvious, like, say, Jimmy Johnson, Willie Henderson, Jim Baxter, moving into the 70s with Kenny Dalglish, 80s, Paul McStay. These guys were flair players, quality, talented footballers. I mean, John Collins probably doesn't get the credit he deserves either, but, JP and I spoke about him on Thursday. When he went over to Monaco, he was a class act. He played as a regular starter for Everton in the Premiership in England. So, yes, I understand why there is that kind of thought process. But coming up against the Germans, obviously, in the opening game, Jim made the point today, would have much rather that we met them in our final game where perhaps Germany didn't have as much to play for and all this kind of stuff as well.
Mm.
And his concern, I think, was the fact that we do have, that middle part of the team, which is insanely talented. And we also have, other talents sprinkled in and around the squad. But it really is maybe the central defensive area that there's a concern around. Would you agree with Jim? That was his concerns earlier today.
Yeah, 100%. One of my mates over here, I mentioned before, he's another Scottish boy. He's from Edinburgh, and he's a big Hibs fan. So we were met up on Wednesday night having a wee chat about the team, and the midfield is really strong. There was a couple of players that we were wondering, you know, Billy Gilmore, for example, does he start? And if he does, who drops out? Um, there's options there. And then when you look at the back line, doesn't bear thinking about at times, Jack Hendry, I'll always remember, I'm sure it's Partick Thistle, the game where he gets the ball and he turns about 3 times, then steps in the ball and gives it away when he's under zero pressure. That's my lasting memory of him. Porteous is a decent defender, somebody that's committed and gets himself in the way, but that's all we've got is people that kind of defend on like heart and instinct. There's not really a natural defender there, apart from Kieran Tierney. And I'm not just saying that because he's ex-Celtic, but Tierney is on his day, a world-class centre back or centre back, left back. But yeah, there's not the strength and depth that we used to have in the back line. There's no pace there really as well, which I think is something you need in the modern game. Coming up against like Wirtz and Musiala, Havertz tonight, you can imagine if they're on fire, then those boys could be in for a long, long evening.
Yeah, and I remember watching a lot of the teams that I've spoken about there, obviously, when we were regularly getting into the finals of the European Championships and the World Cup. And really, it was an opportunity for the players to really pitch themselves against the absolute, cream of the crop, the elite footballers in European football and world football. And, I go right back to, and I said this earlier, I do recall the 86 World Cup. I wasn't as invested in it as I was in the 88 Euros, 90 World Cup and every tournament since then. But when you look at that squad that Scotland had, of course, being managed on an interim basis by Alex Ferguson at the time, due to the tragic passing of Jock Stein during one of the qualifiers against Wales. And then you had, a team of ultimate, honestly, see, when you look at that squad, that was a team that you thought to yourself, if we were ever going to do something in, recent times, fairly recent times, what an opportunity we had with that squad. And that was also without the likes of Kenny Dalglish and Alan Hansen, because obviously there was the falling out of Hansen not being selected and Dalglish saying, right, well, I'm not playing either, because he was the player manager at Liverpool at the time. But you look at some of the players that we had and where they were playing their football as well. And then you look at the domestic talents, because at that time, obviously, with a very strong Aberdeen and Dundee United, and their players were an important part of that squad. It was a phenomenal squad. All these years later, it's taken us really until Steve Clarke takes over. Clarkey was in and around the Scotland squad in the mid-80s as well, to actually get back to a point. But there are weaknesses, and this is my concern. You mentioned Hendry's, I call it the Partick Pirouet, because he just kept turning and going back. And it was a shame for him, because he's gone on to prove that, he's a decent player, Kev. He's gone on, he's had some really good moves. He's become a bit of a mainstay in Steve Clarke's team. But at Celtic, I think it proves technically you can be good enough, but it's not always enough to play for Celtic, because you need to have that mental fortitude that we talk about when we're talking about Tony Ralston and how he can go through long periods of time under various managers and not get a sniff. But then when the opportunity arises, he's able to step up to the plate. Is Hendry a more gifted footballer than Ralston? I know they play in different positions. Probably. Would I rather have Ralston? 100%. So that's what it comes down to, doesn't it? It's a state of mind a lot of the time.
Aye, it is indeed. Hendry's move to us was a surprise at the time, I think, because I don't think he'd really excelled to that level at Dundee that you thought he was ready to step up to Celtic. And it's a massive step up, because the club like Dundee, greatest respect in the world, there's very limited expectations on you. You're not expected to go out and win every game, and every mistake you make is not going to be scrutinised and criticised like it is at a club like Celtic. And it was probably just a move too soon in his career. But yeah, like that moment against Partick Thistle, it's almost as if he was maybe told by the manager, like, you can take the ball up 30 yards out for goal, but then you can't go any further. And he had it in his mind that he couldn't go any further, so he's doing that pirouette around and around, just not knowing what to do. Whereas and a defender with any sort of experience or intelligence, I suppose at that age, would know what to do with the ball, would get rid of it earlier, or would just drive on because he was comfortable in possession. But
Yeah, and
yeah, the
it's
move
a
to us
shame
it
though.
was
It's a shame that we remember him as a meme. It is a shame.
well, it is. But did he not have a mad start that we didn't win a game that he started for so long? There
Hmm.
was something like that with him as well. He just seemed to be a bit of a jinx. But he has improved a lot since. Because what he's gone out and played in Club Brugge and in Belgium. I think he's had spells in England as well. He's played at a high level. So like it probably was just a bit too early for him. But yeah, he didn't have the mental fortitude, as you say, to really drive on and make it at Celtic. And Tony Ralston, to go back to him, did. Because at the same time, that's when Ralston's struggling, and that's when he's getting loaned out to St Johnstone, and everyone thinks his Celtic career's over. But he just stuck at it. He probably realised his limitations as a footballer and just worked on the strengths that he's got. And I think one of those strengths is a mental strength that
Yeah.
he's a fighter. He doesn't give up. He just keeps on going, and it's the old one. He gives you 110% every time he steps on the pitch, and sometimes that's what you need from a player. Rather that than somebody trying to be something that they're not. Alston just does what he does, and he generally does it to an acceptable level at worst.
The thing as well, all these things you think are givens, like prerequisites to a professional football, is that you're always going to be prepared. You're always going to be given 100%, and you'll always do exactly what has been asked of you by your manager. But I think when you watch, even at the top level, Kev, it's not always the case. There's so many highly paid footballers down south who spend a long time out of the starting 11 because they're quite clearly not doing as they're asked, or they're not applying themselves day to day in training. And there's a whole plethora of players down there on silly wages, not actually playing football. So Tony Ralston for me is the antidote to that kind of thing. He's old fashioned in many, many ways,
Mhm.
low maintenance player. No, really, we're near being the first pick for Celtic this season, yet here he is in the opening day of the Euros against the hosts, starting for Scotland. I absolutely love it. I think it's tremendous. Jungle Lion, Shay Given is obviously doing the punditry in Ireland for the game. Wonder, does he know what Simon Donnelly said about him? Well, Jungle Lion, I've got to say this. He did like it. I know that your likes are now hidden on X. He did like that wee video I put out of Simon Donnelly talking about Stuart Kerr being the better goalie, and Shay Given gave it the thumbs up. So yes, he does know JL. It's the old power of the socials as well. The Pork Chop Express. That's tremendous. I mean, where is this based? I want to order a carry out for the Pork Chop Express. I want them to be the sponsors of the Celtic charity games that we put together. Ralston probably could have left and got regular football, but didn't and stayed to help out his beloved Hoops. I applaud him, and so do I. Now, talking about Jack Hendry before we move into some of the more impressive technical footballers on the park, we were speaking there about the fact we signed him from Dundee, and it's something of an underwhelming signing. He had been at Celtic as a young guy, obviously then moved to various clubs before, I think, impressing at Dundee, and Celtic signed him up. I was reading today, I say with interest, I was reading today about a supposed interest in Luke McCowan of Dundee. That was a story that Anthony Joseph broke on the socials today, Kev. I think he's a smashing player, but not for Celtic. I don't think that's where we need to be going in this transfer window. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Um, I've seen, to be honest, I've seen limited footage of him. With being out here, I'm not watching Dundee every week, but I've seen some of the highlights of their games on YouTube and what have you. And I think he's probably stood out from their team in those games. I think he was their top assists man this season. But when he come up and played against us this season, I don't really recall him in any of the games. And I think if you want to make it at Celtic, you need to shine against Celtic if you're playing against us 4 times a season domestically. And he never really stood out. I can, to a degree, get an argument that does he fill out a homegrown player quota for Europe? Maybe. Has he shown that he can do it against the rest of the teams in the league? Yeah, but not consistently. So he's not really ticking very many boxes for me. Um, and he just smacks of being a project signing. And we've spoken about this all season, that this summer we have to move away from making project signings and we have to. Oh, sorry, the light's just gone on in this room and I've gone from being total darkness to being in the light. That was
It's
a bit
adjusted.
weird.
It's adjusted.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's adjusted now. Right. So, aye,
Walk
this
into
summer's
the
supposed
light,
to be one
Kevin.
where we
Walk into the light. Yes.
welcome to the light. Yes, I don't know. Is it any better for you? Maybe I'll go back in the darkness.
No, that's good, man. It's crisp.
That's good. Good. All right. So yes, this season was to be one where we don't sign the project players. McCowan seems like a project signing. I don't see the benefit of it. I think he's 26 as well, so he's not young. If he's between 19 and 22, and there's still a chance for him to develop further as a player, maybe. But signing him probably hinders somebody like Daniel Kelly coming through. And Daniel Kelly's the midfield project player I want this season. A youth player that we've already got that's shown potential.
Yeah, right. Listen, I'm not being ageist, right? He's 27 in December. He was playing until 2021 with Ayr United. He was playing in the Championship prior to last season with Dundee. And I think, and I opened up by saying, I think he's a cracking player. He really has impressed every time he played Celtic. If he's 19 with that career trajectory, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But just about
Totally
27,
different proposition at that age. But
I don't get it.
27.
I just don't get it. It's one of the situations that I hope it's no lazy in terms of Anthony Joseph. It's lazy in terms of there's a young Scottish player gathering interest. Therefore, it must be Celtic and Rangers because virtually every player that's got any kind of interest will be linked to Celtic and Rangers at some point. I would much rather Lennon Miller be on the radar, the Motherwell player, than Luke McCowan. But
yeah, he's a far bigger prospect than McCowan.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody like him, or even Connor Barron at Aberdeen, if we need to be linked with a Scottish midfielder, make it somebody that's kind of that under 21 age group and has big potential to go on and become something better.
Now, I've got here the Urban Culture sharing a little bit of trivia with us. He's telling us that the only current Celtic player he shook hands with is Tony Ralston, and that's great to know, Urban Culture. And I'm wondering if Donny Tiny Hands, with his tiny wee hands, has shook the hand of any current Celtic players. But I do agree with what you're saying, Donny. He should go to Aberdeen or Hearts. I think Aberdeen, Hearts and Hibs are the type of teams that should be hoovering up that type of player in Scottish football, the ones that are just playing out their skin for the respective teams like Motherwell and Dundee. I think Blair Spittle was a player that I like to look up, but no for Celtic. Yeah. That's the type of team that is the next step for me with Luke McCowan. Yes, we digress, but we were talking about Jack Hendry when he was at Dundee before coming to Celtic. And yes, of course, Andy Robertson, we know the links that he's had to Celtic as well. We spoke to Jackie Mack and Simon Donnelly, who had him in his formative years at Dundee United, having seen him playing for Queen's Park. He's now the captain. And I'm looking at the Scotland Twitter channel, and it's telling us that Ryan Christie's getting his 50th cap tonight. I never thought he was experienced as that. 50 caps. Does that surprise you?
That's a bit. Aye.
I'm now checking it.
I would never have guessed.
Yeah, I'm just trying to check that because it has been a bit of it's his 50th cap tonight, Ryan Christie. Bit of a mainstay under Stevie Clarke. That's all it takes, isn't it, for you to become a regular under one manager, get a few campaigns under your belt. Next thing you know, you're in the 50 club. Callum McGregor making his 61st appearance. He's one of the most experienced internationals in that starting lineup. But even Grant Hanley's got 50 caps for Scotland. 50 caps, Grant Hanley. And then you look at somebody like James Forrest.
About 51 too many.
James Forrest has 39. And that's interesting. At the age of 32, he's only got the 39 caps. And of course, there are other players with links to Celtic and others who have been linked to Celtic, but we won't delve too much into that. John McGinn, stand man for Scotland, would you agree? Is he the top man?
He's one of them, for sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's that midfield three of McGregor, McTominay, and John McGinn who
Class.
be the top men for us. Robertson as well, but I always feel he's a hit or miss for the national team. Right, he's had some poor games, and then he'll step up with a captain's performance. But John McGinn and that big beautiful arse of his could be a key for us in these games. Well,
It's very much.
he's a goal threat.
It's up there with Jamesy Forrest's and Kenny Dalglish's backside, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's one of the top three in world football in that sense, right? But he's full of energy. He's a goal threat. He can pass. He's got a bit of dig about him as well. He's just a really good player. And like I said, that arse of his, if he's holding the ball up there, getting the runners going off him, you know, you never know. He's going to put the fear into Jonathan Tah and Rudiger at the back for the Germans. They've never played against a John McGinn before.
No, and again, we don't have to delve into the fact. I remember going to see Celtic play St Mirren at home. We beat them 1-0 that day. Stefan Johansson scored the goal. And prior to the game, I was introduced to Jack McGinn. He's a Celtic figure, I think, that it's unfortunate he never actually wrote a book, Kev. You know, maybe not an obvious choice, but you imagine what Jack McGinn, experienced at Celtic Football Club. He was a guy back in '65 who had the foresight to set up a club newspaper. It went on to become the longest running weekly in world football. And that was the kind of brainchild of Jack McGinn. He was also involved in trying to set up a Celtic magazine on video, the 4 volumes of which are nestling behind me on the shelf there. But obviously, he seen a lot of different things that have never really been revealed. Like the time there was a warning half an hour before a Celtic Rangers game that there was a bomb in the stadium, and the match commander went to him. So loads and loads of incredible stories. But obviously, on that particular day, he was raving about his grandson, who I'm trying to remember. Tommy Craig was the manager. Was he the manager or the assistant? No sure. In fact, it might have been Danny Lennon Danny Lennon was a manager. Tommy Craig was part of the coaching. Yeah, he was part of the coaching team. And Jack McGinn was going on about John, who was 17 at the time, his grandson. And obviously, he come away from it, Kevin, thinking, aye, right, okay, I'm sure he is the next big thing. And he was outstanding that day. And obviously, even at that point, you're looking at him thinking, what would 300 grand be to St Mirren? He had to go to Hibs before we had an interest, and we know what happened there as well. The Germany side, some of the names have been revealed already by Kevin. It's Neuer, Mittelstadt, Tah, Rudiger, Kimmich, Kroos, Andrik, Wirtz, Gundogan, Musiala and Havertz. By the way, it brings back memories. Last week, I paid my final visit to my high school, which is being demolished. Me and a few of my mates went down there, and we were in my German classroom, and the memories started flooding back, Kev. I think I learned to speak German 1 to 10, and that was it. So apologies for my pronunciation of those German players who start the game tonight. Tony, you're watching the live stream on a laptop, Acsom on a smartphone. Brilliant. I love that. That's multitasking. And Danielle, this is what it's about. Almost 20 years. Ralston's been at Celtic. He was 7 or 8 when he joined. That is crazy dedication to the club. And it's the same with Forrest and McGregor. We talk about them as first-team players, Kev. These guys have been at the club since, before they even turned 10. Unbelievable dedication to the football club, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something that you forget because you'll talk about the amount of appearances that they've made over their playing career in the first team others, which would be, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, however long it goes to be. But you've got to look back and go, right, they all joined the club when they were 7 years old. So yeah, it's a 20-year association with the club. There's all those there's highlights of the big wins against Rangers, and the ball boy that's jumping up behind the goal is Callum McGregor celebrating a Celtic goal. He's 13 years old or whatever he is. Then, within the next decade, he's playing for the first team. Another 5 years after that, he's captain in the first team. And these guys they've grown up with the club. It's all they've ever known, and I'm pretty sure it's all they ever want to know in a footballing sense.
I think it's absolutely vital that is always present within the Celtic side. I know that this is a game for Scotland tonight, but we're talking about guys who are on the park playing for Scotland and also one on the bench. 3 of them, when you look at the combined career experience that they've got with Celtic. And I reckon you need a hardcore of that you need a nucleus of that within any Celtic team. And some people might think I'm being a traditionalist or a romanticist or whatever it might be. But I do think that you need to know the fabric of the football club. It gives you it does give you an extra percent. It gives you a different bite when the chips are down. That if you're a Honduran winger, for example, you're not going to have the same feeling, Kev. Get the job done, but go home with a win being everything to you. And I think that is something that's indoctrinated into these guys, from a young age. And then what happens is it's their responsibility to give that same attitude and mentality to any newcomers coming to the football club. Even if it's a step up like Jack Hendry, who's been at the club when he was a kid, but he's at Dundee, but this isn't Dundee, this isn't Wigan. This is different, and I think it's key. And that's why it's important that some of these young guys come through next season. Yeah, we're about to kick off, Kev. I need a prediction from you. Tony Cassidy said 4-0. What are you saying?
Right, first of all, I'm going to answer something that Tony put in the chat earlier on, because I met him out here last year.
Was that for an
Rocket
underage
Field
tournament?
Tony. It was the under-17s last year, yes,
yeah.
under-17s Euros. So Tony's a great guy. So anyone chat to him in the comments, he's brilliant.
Yes.
The drink that's like Rocket Fuel, Tony, is Palinka, and I do not recommend it to anyone because all it does is burn your guts. Prediction for the game, I've been floating between 2 predictions on this one. Either Germany's going to run away with it and it'll be something like 3 or 4-0 because they'll be rampant as the host nation in the opening game, or Scotland will stifle them and they'll sneak a 1-0 win.
Wow, I like that. Now, Celtic follower not only predicts 2-8, he's also watched the Bobby Petta interview. Go and watch it. We're going to have a different guest on every week. We're going to start off with a flurry of ex-Celts. We'll then introduce some other interesting Celtic figures from down the ages, from the world of the arts and movies and all that stuff. Every Friday night, even if there's a Scotland game on to open the European Championships, we will be on with This Is Acsom. I'm going to put it out there, not 2-2, 1-1. There you go. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. We're going to do our half-time and full-time as well. Go and enjoy the first 45. Get yourself a pie and a bevy, and we will see you at half-time. All that's left for me to say thank you once again to Kevin McCluskey for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.